Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the HUFTCAST. Sorry, we have been away for a bit. We've been doing a lot of work on our project for the end of this year that some of you may know about. So we're back and we're here with Charles Williams, who won the Palme d'Or for a short film, All These Creatures. So today we sort of talk to him about how he got there and his journey through growing up in Australia and how he got to Cannes. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Were you born in Melbourne?
Yeah, I've lived in Melbourne my whole life. I only moved to Sydney. It's coming up to 4 years now. Yeah.
Because I grew up in Melbourne. I grew up in
Oh, really? Whereabouts?
in a small town called Parkdale.
I know Parkdale.
Yeah. So I went to school there, and it was kind of weird because when I saw your film, and I'm not sure, but when I saw All These Creatures, I was like, oh, that looks like Dandenong, but I wasn't sure. Is it Dandenong?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, really? Because I saw the skate park in the background, and and I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's Dandenong. But yeah,
Yeah.
but
It's a very unique part of Melbourne. It doesn't look like a lot of the rest of Melbourne.
mm,
Mm.
yeah, I feel that as well. Like when you go towards that way, it's like towards um more like towards oh God, Mornington and stuff like that. It's very different to the rest of like, because I had a friend who lived in like Kew, which was very, very different to where I grew up. And you walk
Yeah.
around there, even places like Elwood as well.
Totally.
But that's what I kind of like. We're actually going back this year in December, hopefully, if it all
Yeah.
works
Nice.
out to
Yeah.
shoot a film.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but so
Whereabouts are you going to shoot?
we're actually going to shoot it in Parkdale. It's going to be my debut feature film. So we're going to try and get as much money as we can to be able to fly over there, and then we're going to shoot the whole film in 2 weeks, and then come back here and edit it. But the whole film's shot in Parkdale, so I'll be staying with like friends and family, which will be nice. But yeah,
It's cool.
whereabouts in Melbourne are you from?
Well, actually, I grew up in the country. I lived about 6 years in Elwood, actually, but as an adult, I grew up though.
Okay.
I grew up about an hour and a half north of Melbourne, um, up until I was about 9 in a proper country farm kind of town called Lancefield, and then from 9 onwards in a real little um, town there wasn't so much farmland. It was just kind of a small town called Kilmore.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
know Kilmore. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's
Cool.
weird hearing this. Obviously, I'm a little bit of an outsider, but coming from London, coming from kind of a cosmopolitan type of background, I guess the entry into filmmaking, into art, must be very different for someone who's coming from, you know, that geographical side. And I think like I just wonder, maybe you could explain like how what your entry into film was like, and how it was perhaps affected by the location of it all and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes very difficult based on a lot of things, not just to do with the location. I mean, living regionally, obviously, there's nothing close to film out there, but there's also nothing even thought of as. I mean, for me anyway, certainly Kilmore, there was nothing even vaguely related to anything creative out there. Like you didn't know a guy who was like knew somebody in the music industry,
Yeah.
and you didn't like know someone whose uncle was a novelist, or like this not existing at all. It was just jobs. And so the idea that you're like gonna not just even get super interested in films but actually want to make them was sort of delusional, I think. And then we're also very poor, so that just makes it even extra delusional. So you're not really thinking of it in any kind of uh, uh, realistic way. It's just something that if you feel like that's something that you have to do, you're just going to do it. But you're not really doing it because you think that there's any real chance of it. You're not weighing it up with a real profession, you know. So it's a little bit crazy, I suppose.
Yeah, it always is though, to a certain degree, you know. I think especially
Yeah.
What age was that spark? What age did that spark kind of hit for you where you really started to consider it, how long were you experimenting up until that point?
I think I was always just film obsessed, like my whole life, even as like a newborn. Like, you know, my mum was a real film nut, and then I was just consuming movies as a kid. But in terms of kind of thinking this is something I want to pursue, I think it was probably my early teens when I started making short films, and you know, it sort of changed because all the movies I was consuming were very family friendly in a really odd way. Like my mum was obsessed with musicals and like old MGM movies, and so I was just watching tons of that stuff. And then my parents divorced when I was 9, and it just opened the floodgates of, you know, like there was no space to properly parent me at that stage. Well, like I don't mean it that way, but I mean, we just don't have the time to like watch what you're watching, and we've got bigger problems. So like,
Yeah.
I was just watching anything, and it made a big difference because like films just started to become not just ways to escape my reality, but ways to kind of try to understand it. Even like really cheesy movies or Hollywood movies, like I saw everything. I don't think there's a movie that was made in the 90s that I didn't see more than 5 times. You know, no matter how bad it was, I just watched everything. And it just became a way of me to kind of, you know, not just be entertained, but it sort of started, I was sort of noticing I was sort of processing some difficult emotions watching the films, and finding sometimes characters that were dealing with things that I thought were just for myself. And I started to realize there's a lot more going on here than that's more profound, and that I'm not going to get anywhere else in the world through any other way. It felt to me that there's nothing else that made me feel as connected and as you know, as kind of seen, or whatever that thing is that makes you see yourself and feel compelled to be part of it. And I think that was around like the early teens, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few. Like I remember watching Goodfellas for the first time when I reckon I would have been about 12 when it was on TV once, and I saw a scene of it on TV. As you can imagine, like half the movie's cut when it's on TV. There's just, you know, it's just a mess. But I saw a scene from it on TV, and it was just a random scene, nothing particularly great, just one of the basic scenes of the movie. And it was so vivid and kind of terrifying because just the way the characters spoke to each other was so real. It was like they were alive, and it wasn't this. They were just saying, "We're not a movie. This is real." And I remember thinking, like, I dreamed it for like a year. I'd only seen a couple of scenes from it. I remember thinking, I must have made it up. And there it was again on TV again. And I was like, what? And I saw more of it. I was like, what the fuck is this? And then it just kind of took me down like a rabbit hole of like, obviously seeing that movie, seeing every other movie that guy had made, seeing movies that he'd seen. And it still was just years and years and years. And probably to this day, one of those things where you're like, what was that movie? Like, how did that, you know, what were the things that made that such a vivid, profound experience for me? And obviously since then you've had it with a lot of movies, and yeah, it's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah.
Something I heard you saying, it's actually so weird to hear you say it, that, I mean, for some reason, I feel like everyone has that spark around the same age, around 11, 12, 13. It really hits them. I think it must be something to do with mental maturity. But you talked about how, you know, the first thing you saw was Goodfellas and Martin Scorsese was the entry. For me, it was exactly the same. I mean, I didn't know, I had an interaction with film on a very basic level, you know, like Pixar movies and stuff like that. But when I heard about intellectual cinema, I was like, the first person my dad would tell me about is Martin Scorsese. And so I started watching Martin Scorsese movies, and then from there, like you said, I started watching what he was watching in a weird way. And it's weird how everybody kind of thinks the same and has that same entry into, you know, the way they kind of find their feet.
Yeah, and I think that age is obviously when you're kind of looking for other things or trying to experience something beyond just like kiddie tastes, and then, you know, like the whatever else, sometimes there's something you need in your life that's not provided anywhere else, because obviously a lot of people watch those movies and are like, that's a good movie, and that's all.
Yeah.
And then there's other people where it just speaks to you about all of these things that that you carry around with you, and you watch it again and again and again, and yeah.
And from there, was it like, did you have a natural progression to end up in film school, or was your journey a little bit different?
It was different. I started doing like acting as well for a few years, doing like acting courses and stuff, and it became apparent to me pretty quick, like, I don't enjoy this very much, or there's something else that I want to do that's not acting. And it actually wasn't long. It was only like 2 years or so, I would say, that I realized, okay, I want to just be a filmmaker. All of about 15 years old. And then, you know, like I said, we're very poor. So the idea of even going to university seemed like beyond the pale. No one in my family had ever gone to university before. And, you know, my parents hadn't finished high school. So it didn't seem possible, but it was just the expense that concerned me. And also, I think I was a bit of a snob even. Like, I was like, I don't want to go to Australian universities. They're not good enough for film. I need to go to NYU and UCLA.
Yeah,
that's exactly
like
us.
fucking,
yeah. On our podcast, we keep on getting dark reminders from every guest that we talk to about how we were literally the exact same until a couple of months ago when we didn't get in.
So it's the same thing. It's like, oh, you know, humble me. How do I get to university? And then like, oh, I'm not taking that shit. I'm only going to go if it's fucking NYU.
Yeah.
Which is crazy amount of money that I would never have afforded. But so without looking at the detail of it too much, I was working a lot of jobs anyway, young. And I remember just working kind of a lot of hours to try and think, if I save up enough money, I'll go to uni. And a lot of the jobs I started working, initially they were labor intensive, like at a butcher or whatever. But eventually working at a video store, and in particular a service station, sometimes before school and after school, long hours, is that I had a lot of time on my hands while I'd work this job. And I'd just be reading all these film textbooks, like way too many film textbooks. And, you know, I sort of had known a lot about, I had subscribed to American Cinematographer and was reading all these, just too much stuff. Like, I was 16, I just have all this information. And then I went to like a summer school of filmmaking, and I met a fairly famous cinematographer there in Australia. And he started taking me on film sets and was very generous with me. And he had told me, he was like, don't go to film school. He's like, you'll know more than your teachers. Just, you know, trust me, I teach at film schools. He's like, just go, you just need to. And I think also I was aware that I hated school so much that I thought, you know, film school would be a problem. So basically I spent all the money that I'd saved up when I was about 19 making a really flashy short film. And at this time, it would have been about the year 2001. It was only film that you could shoot on. You know, you could shoot on videotape, which of course is garbage. But to make an actual film, you had to shoot on film. And so I shot it on 35 and made it all flashy and whatever. And and positioned it for a festival out here called Trop Fest, which is a real, you know, like a major event, film festival. Not an arty one, like a really, they showed on TV and everything. And I got in, which was already a big deal. And then I won the like best young director award, which was a huge prize too. Like, they gave you a computer and film editing software and all of this great stuff. And that sort of got me on my way to kind of, you know, maybe I could direct TV commercials, or, you know, like start directing and just make that my focus. You know, I started directing other short films and just kind of balancing between as many things as I could.
I was going to say, because in Melbourne there, I was like, wouldn't say a lack of opportunities, but there's a fair few. Like, I remember when I must have been about 14, and we went into Flinders Street, and there was like this studio there, and that was the only film related thing in the whole of Melbourne. And there was like 2 or 3 film festivals, and my friend's dad was a DP as well, so we were like always asking him questions as well, and he was like, oh yeah, you should just go here and here and here, and that's pretty much it. So we sort of had like the lack of opportunities, but I wasn't sure if maybe you saw that, or maybe we were just not paying enough attention to what was out there?
No, I felt that way. I mean, to be honest, I felt for a lot of years that there must have been plenty of opportunities, but like there was a party that I wasn't invited to. You know, there must be something going on, but I can't see it. And in truth, it's just that there's not much going on. And everyone else, I think, feels the same way. So they're all pretending that there's stuff out there that, you know, they're doing. But a lot of the time you're just kind of hustling your own thing. And, you know, some people get lucky because there are film bodies that finance stuff, but I couldn't get any. I got a lot of rejection letters from whether it was Film Victoria or Screen Australia, and I was not really getting any traction to get money for things. But I was relatively good with another guy that I was co-producing with, just kind of committing to something and then finding a way to make it happen. And, you know, and then you just meet people and somehow you manage to pull stuff together. Like you will find someone that could give you some bit of money, and then everyone works for free and you can kind of pull something together. I don't know how sustainable it is, you know, but I just kept doing that. And then I would do a couple of TV commercials and just sort of try to have some, you know, kind of stability. And so for a few years, that's what it was, just short films, TV commercials, doing a lot of stuff. And just trying to continue making films, you know. But it never, like you say, it never really felt like you were ever getting anywhere. You know, like if there was anywhere to get, I was like, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting invited to this party where people are financed or whatever or developed. It's just like I'll save money and then I'll spend it all and make a film, and then it's like, okay, now let's just should do that again.
Yeah.
Even when the films were successful, you know, or relatively successful, you know, it just felt like they weren't really getting me any place. And yeah, and that sort of just went on for a while. And eventually I went completely broke, and just had to just get a day job. I mean, I kind of failed, I think. I mean, it was a mixture of things. Like I was 25 and, you know, like it was just all of that kind of stuff of like, I'll just make a film and then I'll do this. It just hadn't gotten me anywhere. And I kind of was 25 and I felt much older and I felt like a failure at that point. And then, you know, my mum, this is a longer story, but my mum suddenly, I was told, was going to die by the weekend. And I was like, fuck, all right, well, you know, I dropped everything and I was filming a commercial at the time. And the end of that story was, it was 2 years and I had to take care of her for the 2 years. And I went completely broke during that time. And at the end of that time, just because I hadn't made anything, I was like, fuck, I've just got to make anything. I just got to make something again. So I made another short film, which to this day, I can't really understand what the fuck it's about. Like, it's just it was another film for this Tropfest festival. And
Better Be Blood.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Yeah. And I still don't know what the hell it's about, but I was like, I've just got to make something within a month, and Tropfest was coming up. And my mum was still alive. Like, it had been 2 years, and I thought I'll just get this thing done. And so I did, and I made this film that got in. And then she died like the day before Tropfest. And then I went there, and then now I was like totally broke, like more than broke, like in debt. You know, I couldn't even pay for a funeral. I had to pay that off again. It's just a sad story. Yeah. And it was like, fuck, like it was just like the most failure in a way, but also
you felt like
knowing,
nothing was sort of going your way.
Yeah, that's right. And kind of knowing that, you know, only so much of it is my fault, but it doesn't help. And so I just took a job, and I just started working like a 9-to-5 type job, making like content for, you know, in Melbourne. And that was fine. I just started to rebuild my life. And I think in some way I'd almost kind of given up a bit. I knew I was always going to just continue to try and make film, but the weight of the hopelessness of it, you just couldn't stick with that. And so it was kind of freeing. And when I let go of all of that stuff, of trying to like make it and like do this thing and get somewhere and figure out how to get this thing going, I sort of just said, fuck it. And went like, you know, there's a sort of sense of failure and freedom to it. And I started just kind of following things that I thought were very interesting for myself that weren't necessarily what I thought was right. You know, like I wasn't trying to be right anymore. I was just sort of more following my own instincts a bit.
Yeah.
And then I started to kind of see some other films that I liked, and I started working with those guys a bit, produced some films for another guy that I met that I liked his films, and then, you know, it just kind of led me to eventually to this short film, like a short, you know, there's a film called Home that I've got up there that wasn't really a short film. That was like a thing I was paid to do from a council. And, but there was a different approach to my work is all I could say. Like it was less anxiety ridden and more, you know, like I don't really have to please anybody. And you know, I'm going to just, the process by which I'm going to make this thing is going to be less torturous, and I'm going to try and define the kind of movies I want to make rather than like ascertain what I think is going to be successful and work back from there. And there was a lot of things to it. There was a different change in approach, which culminated in this short film in all these creatures.
Like finding your honesty type of thing, like
something like that. Yeah, I don't really know the way to put it, but that's probably a good way. You know, I think there's something also about it was tough, I think, with all of the earlier films and all their work, not just being young, but also coming from my background. It was very hard to give yourself permission to just what you think is enough. You know, there's just an innate feeling that you don't know. Why would you know? You know, other people know. Especially when you've never been creative, you've never known anyone creative. You don't really know how to inhabit that kind of space where you're like, I'll just see what I think. You know, like the answers will come to me, and that'll be okay, and I'll figure it out. And like that sense of trust that you have to have when you're making your own thing. There's a kind of permission that no one else can give you, that you have to give yourself. And look, some people just innately have it, and shouldn't. Like there's some terrible films out there for some very, you know, rich young kids who innately think they have amazing things to say and they have nothing to say. But regardless, you sort of need to have that, I think, to do anything. Otherwise, you're constantly riddled with all this anxiety about, you know, not giving yourself permission to make mistakes and to venture away from what you think is acceptable, or how it's supposed to be done, or what's professional and what isn't professional. And to me, it just took time. Like I just can't imagine that I could have gone back and figured that out somehow. It just took a certain level of failure and a certain level of, I mean, it wasn't even failure, just a certain level of time to give myself kind of permission to think like, you know, the way I think it should be is how it's going to be. And I won't waste people's time, and I'll be kind to everyone I work with, and I'm not an asshole, and I'm not, you know, entitled, but, you know, the way I feel is the way it's going to be. And that's the only barometer I can do. And also that's the only way I can respect anyone else I can work with. If I'm trying to like intellectually solve a maths problem of how someone else thinks it's going to be, I'm never going to get anything good. The only chance I have of getting something good is by like feeling it and going, does this respond to me? And if it doesn't, we have to fix it. I have to find a way to fix it. Yeah, I hope that makes some sense. It's as good as I can articulate it. Yeah.
I think the battle is finding the balance between not being entitled, but also trusting yourself more than anybody else. I think it's very hard, but important as a filmmaker to know that.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a real balance that is hard to find. And I think, look, as long as you're not wasting anyone's time and you're being respectful of other people, they're there to support you in that. You know, like I've worked with other directors where I haven't been the director on set, and it's been an insightful process because you realize when you're the director, you don't see this because you're just like, it's all on you. But if you get to stand back, you realize everyone is here just to be part of like something great. They want something surprising and amazing to take place. And if, you know, like feeling self-conscious because you've got to do some weird actorly shit on set, or, you know, like whatever game you need to play that you think's not professional or how it's supposed to be done. You know, like if you want to, like I sometimes do, like I'm going to, you know, the actors are going to cry for 3 minutes before we start the take. And no, you can't roll sound on this or whatever. we're just going to do it this way. No, we're not going to have makeup on this, or I'm not going to have marks there, but whatever the way that you're going to play the game for this scene, they're there for that. You think they're not, and anyone who isn't there for that, you shouldn't be there. We're not tradies. We're not building. We're not carpenters here.
Yeah.
Even when people pretend they are, they're there to be a part of that and to support that. It's very I think. Regardless, especially Australians, regardless how blokey and professional and everyone wants to pretend that they're just doing a job on set, it's all a front. I mean, it's very discouraging for people, grips included, to go home at the end of the day and go like, well, we rolled some film and shot some stuff and it is what it is. They want to feel like they saw something or were a part of something that was risky and interesting and daring and all of that stuff,
Mm.
That's what I tell myself anyway.
Yeah. I was going to ask though, I was thinking like, during all this time of you making these films, did you feel like there was something you were working towards, like the holy feature film one day or whatever, but or was it just more of a thing where you're like, fuck it, I'm going to just do what I need to do and wherever it takes me, I'll just go along with that?
I mean, both. Like when I was making the earlier shorts, I made some that I was designing, like the Tropfest ones in particular. I was like, I'll make it so that it gets there because that will give me some attention and legitimacy or whatever. Which is why for me, like I got no problem with those films, particularly the first one is really good for a 19-year-old. But there's a ceiling to how good that's going to be, like, because clearly you're just designing it for like an outcome. And then I made a film called, it was like 22 or 23, called The Cow Thief. And in a way, it was almost too far in the other direction. Like I really was so daring in terms of like, I'm just going to like put blinders on and forget that an audience is ever going to see this. And I'm just going to make this as true to what I feel like my experience of this was. And I made a movie that I think is pretty wild and pretty good. It did quite well, particularly in America, but it was too far that direction. And a lot of people were just like scratching their heads going, I can't connect to this. So it's very difficult. You've got to remember that there's this other side of it, which is like, how would I feel if I had never seen this before and it was just thrust upon me in a cinema? And I think even that film, I would have gone, needs to be, it's not generous enough as a film. It's too much. It's like someone talking at you rather than to you. Is how that film feels now. Still, like, I'm still proud of it. Like, again, like it's still quite a good film, especially for a 22-year-old. But yeah, that was the limit of that. But I didn't really know where to go with any of these things with these shorts. Like where does that get me, and how do I develop as a filmmaker? And it wasn't really taking me anywhere.
Okay. So like obviously. All these creatures did really, really well going to like Cannes. And when you got to Cannes, was it like, did it feel like you were like, okay, cool, now I need to go do this and do this? Or was it more like, oh, this is quite interesting, all these people here? I just want to know, like, how does it sort of work out? Because you're getting ready to make a feature film, or you're already making it, aren't you?
No, getting ready to, yeah.
Oh, okay. So was that opportunity came about at Cannes, or how did that sort of work out?
No, I had this idea before all of that. I think maybe before I had the idea for the short, I had the idea for this feature, but it felt pretty hopeless. Like, again, prior to this film, I'd never received $1 from any funding body or whatever. And I was just feeling like I'm not included in whatever this industry is. So it was very hard to see a way of getting that feature happening. Now, but having said that, once I got to Cannes, it was like, okay, well, this is going to be a lot more possible now. And so I spent my time there meeting with sales agents, distributors, international producers, sort of a lot of meetings all day for the whole duration of the festival to try and find the right partners to get that movie going.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'll say it in more simple terms to what Harvey said, but sometimes, especially as a young person, you think about making a short film when you're like, oh, imagine if we got to Cannes. And it's like you hear all these stories and like, so it gets selected at Cannes, it shows, and then A24 just walk up to me afterwards and like, yo, do you want to make a feature film? But I think a lot of the time it's a lot more complicated than that, right?
Yeah, for sure. But that's not totally, like, it is more complicated than that, but it is all like, there is a lot of attention that you get. I mean, particularly if you win. There's only one Palme d'Or a year, and whoever's got that, people like, all right, so what if you got, it's not like, hey, you greenlit, but it's like, we'll hear what you've got to say. Like, clearly there's an audience out there for someone like you. And also, I think even it's not even just the award. I mean, it is, but they then watch the film, and then a lot of people are like, fuck, well, I like this. What else have you got? And that's all it is.
Yeah. And did you find that, like, when people were watching your short, did you find like they were exclusively interested in being like, oh, can this be a feature, this short? Or do you think they were open to the idea of doing other features and stuff like that?
Open to the idea of doing other things. Like, I never would think of doing that as a feature, just for my tastes. It's perfect for me for a short, but I wouldn't do something like that as a feature. Although my feature is very similar in its style and themes and tonally, but that narrative I wouldn't transpose to a feature. To me, it just works perfectly as that kind of length. So some people had said, would you extend this? And I've always said no. And then I've already had the story for the feature going, so I just tell them that story, and that usually gets things going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. When you arrange meetings in Cannes, and really now I'm just hashing out teenage questions, is it kind of, you get there, like you said, you have meetings all day, every day, like how does this, come about, and who sets these things up? Is it the producer of your film having to actively seek these things out, or
Well, I was sort of really the main producer of the film. Like, I had a co-producer, but she had not been involved for a long time in the film and wasn't at Cannes. So really the meetings and things came about as a mixture of some people who had gotten in touch with me after the film was selected, but then most of it was me kind of proactively finding people. I have another friend of mine that's a producer who's based in the US now, and she's made a feature and knew a lot of people, and she did a lot of introductions for me and said, while you're there, you should meet this person, that person, that person. And so there were those meetings, and and then I was like, I know that agent that I like is going to be there. I'll get in touch with them, and you find a way to get to people that you want to meet, and then you just set up meetings. Like, I was just, I had my little girl with me, who was like 1 at the time, and then so I'd wake up with her, sleep patterns and jet lag. Like, I'd wake up at like 4:30 in the morning. Yeah. I'd do a bit of writing, and then I'd do meetings all day long, just quick meetings, like 15 minutes or something. And I'd be in bed by like 8:30. I was not really partying or doing the whole,
the hard
Cannes thing.
Experience.
No, I mean, I've been to a few parties in my life. Like, I don't need to have them in Cannes. It's like, how many times am I going to get here? I better use this opportunity smart,
But yeah, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about all these creatures. And obviously you talked about making a short before that and where you were and that time. What kind of switched the light bulb for all these creatures? And because I'm not sure if I'm right in saying this, but with Home, that short film you made, it was about the refugee crisis. And then with all these creatures, I kind of got PTSD vibes from the father, and obviously, there's like, a strong sense of African culture in there. And I was wondering if there is any themes of the refugee crisis or anything like that in there.
No, there's not. It's Home and all these creatures really don't have anything to do with each other. Also because I didn't write Home, and Home, in a way, didn't even start out as a film. It like a council, as councils would do, were like, oh, we want to do something around some, kind of important issue, especially in Dandenong, because they have an unbelievable level of diversity there. There's like 190 different languages spoken around Dandenong. And they wanted some like content for their screen. and they said, oh, well, here's a local poet we've got, and we've worked with you before, you guys go make something, and here's a budget. And, we just exceeded their expectations to such a degree and made something that was clearly a kind of a film. And they let us enter it in film festivals. And then it took off pretty well. So that's really how Home happened. It was really taking Toriro's poem and me figuring out a way to make that into a film in some way. But All These Creatures, no, it didn't even start out as an African story in any way. Okay. I just wrote it as a kind of, there was no ethnicity to it. It was more personal. And then knowing that the lead role was, preteen kid, and how hard it would be to find someone to fill that role, I thought pretty quickly, like, it's going to be foolish of me to try and just immediately narrow that pool of possibilities to say, oh, this is going to be a white boy who looks like me. It just seemed unnecessary, and it would be so hard already to find someone who had the kind of, it's a very innate role, there's only so much directing you can really do in a way. The father in the film is the opposite. It's a much more challenging role, but there's a lot of elasticity of it. There's a lot of directing, there's a lot of aspects of that character, but the kid is really, most of the time he's just looking off screen, and he's got to have a real presence to him that most kids that age just will not have. So I then just looked at kids from every background, and then eventually any gender. Like, I was looking at girls as well that came in, and I almost cast a girl in the end, and there's a boy from Scotland. There's a wide range of people. And once I found Yared, who's Ethiopian Australian, I was convinced eventually that's the kid. And so I brought on 4 different Ethiopian Australian advisors to, read the script and make sure that, how do I make it more truthful for that culture without making it about that culture? This is just a person and this is a family. Then I found the father, and, I revised the script a little bit, but the interesting thing was that the advisors were 2 of them were like, no, this is written about Ethiopian Australians. And I was like, no, it's not. And they're like, yes, it is. They were insistent on arguing with me. And I said, really? I haven't. And they said, this is so Ethiopian. It's not like Sudanese. This is not like Angolan. This is so Ethiopian. And I thought, maybe that I've written something good here, if that's the case. If people really identify with this and feel like it's only about them, then there's got to be something good here that, that I've hit on. Because to me, it was as much just as about me, or just being poor, or being, that mental illness and family and all these things, but things you keep private, I suppose. To answer your question, the ethnicity was really secondary to the film.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a testament to how good of a job you did, I guess. In the build up to this, how long did you spend writing and pre-production and development for this project? Was it kind of drawn out, or did it seem to come together faster than some of your previous projects?
I think it was pretty quick. From having the idea for the film to screening at Cannes was a year.
Wow.
It wasn't long. I think my daughter had just been born as well, and this was in 2017 in March, and it was about a week after she was born that I was writing the film. And it was pretty soon. I had what the film was kind of going to be, in a month, and then continued to, like you do, just hone it, rework it, write it, rewrite it, and all that stuff. While we made it, the whole thing. And I think we shot it September. We're supposed to shoot it in June or July, but I brought on a producer who vanished, and 2 weeks before filming, and who had said she had all these commitments that didn't exist, and she just it was a bit of a nightmare. And so then I found a friend of mine who'd never made a film before, but she'd done some ads and things, and I'd worked with her, and so she came on board and helped me pull it back together. Not a long amount of time.
It's even more impressive that you know, she dropped out 2 weeks before filming. You still managed to turn it around in a year. That's crazy.
Yeah, look, I mean, the production of the film was very, very difficult. I mean, nothing went right. It was pretty tough. It was filled with like a lot of the nightmares of production that you encounter.
Yeah. How long was your shoot?
It was 5 days. The days were very short because we have very strict child labour laws, particularly in Victoria. So we could have only 6-hour days, and I mean, there was a lot of stuff. We had child psychologists on set. We had to have separate toilets that we had to bring to set because the children aren't allowed to use the same toilets as adults.
Okay.
You know, like there's a lot of stuff that we had to do for the kids because they were under 15. Yeah. So 5 days, and then there was, after I shot and then cut it, and again, you're shooting on film, so the post stretched out a bit because we had the film developed in the US, and because it's much cheaper. Basically, we have a very small lab here in New South Wales, but it's very cheap to process in the US, but it's risky, obviously. And then I ended up shooting another day in January, just for pickups, you know.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's like the one thing I wanted to comment on was the texture and the feel of the film is so consistent throughout every aspect of it. You know, from the acting, the production design, the cinematography, the sound. It all really feels like it's glued together very strongly by something which I haven't seen in a lot of other films, which is really interesting. And one thing I wanted to touch on was the sound. Like the sound really makes you like feel it. You know, it's got like that crackling and the organ and all that stuff. What was this? Was that a very collaborative process between you and your sound designer, composer, the whole team, or was how did that kind of come about, that feeling?
The sound was something I was thinking about a lot when I was writing the script, and so I even wrote kind of things that I thought would help sound design while I was writing it. Because obviously, with a lot of sound design stuff, if it's not in the scene, it's pretty tough to just come up with stuff that's going to be really great. Yeah. So I sort of thought about things like the obvious example was like when they're in the car, and I was like, I really need a sound that's going to feel unnerving and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, I'll just make sure there's a broken window and like some plastic covering it, and that'll give me that sound. And there was stuff, and then obviously the cicadas as well, like going, okay, well, this will be an immersive, like auditory thing that will create a feeling. And just trying to think of sounds that I thought would help guide the movie. So that was really at the script stage. And then the sound designers on the film I've worked with for forever, like, you know, since my first stuff. And they were very generous. They were like, you know, they were like, let's just, and they work for free, of course. And they were just like, you know, let's just do it until you're happy. We'll just keep doing it until you're happy. And so, you know, we just did that, and they did a really great job. So, you know, it's and the music is astonishing. That was Chiara Costanza, and I don't think Chiara had ever done a short film before. She's a DJ in Melbourne and had done music. She composed for ads and things, but I think this was her first short. And we took a long time to get the music right. You know, it's interesting because some of the hardest pieces came very quickly, but the subtler pieces took a really long time and a lot of drafts. And she was terrific, and obviously a really good collaborator, because she was willing to do all that work and willing to, you know, like redraft without kind of complaining and all that stuff. She didn't leave the project because I was too demanding or anything. She was really enthusiastic.
Yeah. It's very interesting that, like, with short films, when I was younger, my idea of short films was just me with my DSLR and my mates making a film. And then once I started to realize that there was something different between what I was making and what I was watching in the cinema and stuff, I started to realize that there were different kinds of shorts as well, like yours and other shorts. And when I was watching them, I was like, this is so far removed from anything which I've ever done before. How on earth, like, can you get there? And I think actually the magic of it all is that sometimes it's a lot less complicated than it seems on the outside. It's complicated, but I mean, sometimes you look at some shorts and you think, wow, they were made in like £100,000. They must have like so much money, like that. Everything is just crazy. I don't know how they did all this, but then sometimes you hear stories like the entire sound team worked for free, and like you realize that it's not really, like it's more about what you're getting out of the opportunity, and rather than the opportunity itself, I think, and that's kind of honing your craft. So it's very interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, the film was very low budget, but we did have a lot of. I mean, it depends how you look at budget. I mean, people work for free, so it's not the same as like. It's really that they invested. Like those people were like investors in the film. We had a crew that was pretty substantial still, and it's not a simple movie. Like driving scenes are pretty tough. Shutting down roads, all of the stuff was really intensive, like labor intensive stuff, and then shooting at dangerous locations and having safety officers, like it was a huge pain in the ass. Like I really made it as hard as I could for myself. Animal wranglers and insects and stuff, like just a nightmare. So it was a complicated shoot, and a lot of actors people that had never acted before, been on set before. So yeah, it was a complicated way to film, but yeah.
Yeah, and producing and directing at the same time must have been a nightmare for you, because you're having to handle the wranglers and the safety officers while you're trying to make magic with the.
Pretty much, yeah. But I've always done it that way, and I've sort of gotten used to it in a way. Like I also have my co-producer, so if things are like I literally can't do anything right now, I need to stick with the actors. Like and you've got a production manager as well and a first AD. You learn to work with those people to go, look, I need time. I need to be left alone. If there's some problem with the catering or God knows what, like, don't tell me about it. I'm sure you can figure it out. So yeah, there's ways of working around that stuff.
I was just going to ask, you mentioned that they were non-actors, the people who acted in it. And what was that like working with non-actors, and what was probably the biggest struggle with that, or advantage? Because that's what we're going to be doing in December this year.
It's great. It's just like it just depends on what the role is. Like I've done both. I've worked with a lot of different people. The father in the film is an actor. He went to NIDA here. He was just finishing uni. NIDA is like a famous acting school here. But the rest of them had never been in a film before, or usually anything like it. Some of the people I just found, like all of the boys' friends in the film, I found, and literally I saw them getting into a fight in the street, getting into a punch on, and I like ran in and like asked them if they'd been in my film. It's very tough to find a certain kind of kid, and like I found them. I was like, that's the kids. And a lot of the people you just need to find a certain face and a certain behavior and a certain honesty that you're not going to get out of some actors, and certainly an actor that age. Like a 13-year-old actor sounds like he's auditioning for Neighbours most of the time, or they've just got a different way of being, and they've got a different upbringing. Yeah. And with a non-actor, you have to direct them very carefully. But as long as you're not asking them to do something that is not who they are, you can get some great, really wonderful truths and something really profound there. But it's just about how you direct them. You're not asking them to do things that is outside of their comfort zone. Like really what you're doing is clearing a path through all of the noise of a film set and giving them permission to just do whatever the fuck they want, and just shoving them this way and that and letting them be themselves.
So did you feel that you sort of had to get to know them before you started shooting, or is it just more like okay, let's go and see how it works out?
No, you got to get to know them. I think with the smaller roles, you just don't have that opportunity. And there's only so much you want to, like, these kids want to talk about. Like, they're like, what? I don't know. All right. They don't really want to dive into character. They're just like, well, I don't know. Okay, yeah, I guess. So, but, with the lead of the film, Yared, like he has interest in acting, but he hasn't done anything yet. And that was a lot of getting to know him and doing a lot of rehearsals and a lot of everything, like a lot of stuff with him to try and find the right side of him, because he's not that character at all. Like, and in the end, I recast another kid to do the voice. He doesn't even have that voice. He just sounds like a, hey, how you doing? Like happy kid. He just doesn't have that melancholia. But he managed to tap into something when he was focused that is really powerful, but it's not who he is at all. So it was about just finding a way to get him there. With particularly, like, at one stage, it was even about just keeping him away from sugar, because he was at the first day's filming, his performance was not really, there's something wrong. And I realized he'd been eating the sugar from the snack table all day long, and it was just messing with his ability to sit still. And I was like, all right, no more, no more for you. And that helps, like, it could be anything when it comes to helping an actor. Sometimes it's just, and also working with the other actors, you're not alone, like bringing them into the process of helping, especially a younger actor, I brought in Mandela, who plays the father, and said, like, help Yared, and that's a good thing for him. That's good for both their relationship as father and son as well in the film. And for him to take on the reins a bit of, like, how do I help this kid get the performances is a fatherly thing. And there's it's a range of stuff that I think you try and experiment with to get something worth putting on film.
And did you have a strong collaboration with your casting director, or
Yeah, I've worked with her for a long time, and she's really good, and really, a lot of casting directors, I think, would have just thought, a fucking short film with no budget, like, already that's painful enough. But then this guy's going to tell me he doesn't even know what he wants for the lead, and it could be any race. Like, that just sounds not pleasant. I think a lot of casting directors would have gone, like, seriously, like, give me something to work with. But instead, she said, why just no race? Like, why not open it up to gender too? And I was like, great, like, let's do that. And so she was like, yeah, and we just brought in a ton of people. And then I did some of it myself. I went out to Dandenong and held, like, open auditions for people, and and she was also just good, just helping me sort through it all. So she was really, she's the best. She's great.
Is it all right? Are you allowed to say what the budget of the film was, or is that something you're not?
Yeah, no, you can. It's tough, like, to this day, because it changes, after the film, because suddenly you got to pay a distributor, and then there's other costs that keep coming in. So I can't even be so sure, but I can tell you it's certainly less than £20,000. But I'd say closer to 15, maybe.
Sure thing.
I'd say somewhere around there. I'd say, mate, let's say 20, but it wouldn't be more than 20.
Yeah. Is it really expensive to shoot on 16mm? It's not someone who's from the film era. How does it compare to shooting on digital?
Yeah, it's more expensive. Yeah, it's expensive. They're simple, yeah. Look, I mean, there are ways around it that help curb some of that expense. My cinematographer had his own 16mm camera. Not a lot of people are using 16mm lenses, so you get them from a rental house pretty cheap and easy. Whereas an Alexa, they're out constantly, so they're harder to get your hands on sometimes. Although some DOPs have their own now. So the camera isn't expensive. The film itself obviously is expensive. Very, very tough to, like, Kodak gave me a very good deal on the film stock. And then I got a very good deal out of CineLab in New York for processing. A really good deal, about a third of what it usually would cost out here. And then you just don't shoot, you try not to shoot too much. And then what else happened? I'd won a prize from a previous short film at a lab out here, not a lab, like a telecine place, a grading house. So they would do the transfer of the film to tape, a really shitty one, like just one that you'd use for editing. And that was covered by that like voucher thing that I had. And then once you've finished cutting and you know what your selects are, you can send the EDL from that to a proper scanning place, which I found in New Zealand, Park Road, and they would scan in the negative on a proper scanner, like an ARRI scanner, in 4K. And look, again, usually that's very, very expensive. And they were very good and sponsored the film. So that we were very lucky and whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so it's a much bigger pain in the ass than shooting digitally. You shoot digitally, you stick the card in the computer and there you go.
Yeah.
Film's a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but it's the pain which it's all about the struggle, you know, that's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it was right for this film for sure. Like, it was just, there's no other way. I thought, but yeah, it's you know, it's a good compromise. It's also good. Most people tell you it's crazy as well if you're working with non-actors, because you need takes. You know, you need that flexibility. But you know, I was aware of that, and I thought it was worth the risk. Yeah.
And I know I listen to a lot of directors speak, and you know, like you, they say my casting director, you know, the different crew members they work with, they have a long-standing relationship with them. So when it came to working on the feature together, that, you know, that kind of translated over very easily. How would you say that, like, because I mean, I don't know if you were ever in the situation with all these creatures where for one key member of crew, you had to seek out a new person who you'd never worked with before. How do you find that right person when that relationship isn't pre-existing? Because obviously you can jump on Mandy or one of those or shooting people and find someone, but how do you find that right person who's, you know, really going to resonate with what you're trying to do?
I think that's a really good question, because I think that's what we're all going to do at some point. And yeah, I did. Like, there was a few, particularly some of the best people I think that I really will be working with again in future. I just happened to find on this film. There was the co-editor I worked with, Dan. I never worked with Dan before, and the score, Kiara. Like, I'd never worked with Kiara before, and we worked really well together. And luck, you know, like, to some extent. I mean, you meet them first, obviously, and if you go, well, look, we're not on the same page, or you know, like, I don't like you, or like whatever thing, you have to go, like, can I talk to this person? You know, like, are we going to be able to get along enough to get through this? And then also, like, what are their thoughts about this, independent of me? And are those thoughts that, you know, I think are close enough to what I think, or better than what I think, or do, you know, like, are they someone who's got the right thing? And then also, obviously, you've seen their work and you're choosing it based on your thing of going, you know, I think what they're doing is going to be somehow applicable to what I'm doing. And yeah, I mean, you know, and sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you really don't.
Yeah.
So it's there's no science behind it, I think, and you're always going to be having that thing. It's the same with actors, though. I think you just have to take it more seriously than, you know, people sometimes should and do usually take the acting casting seriously, but you have to take the crew casting pretty seriously too.
Yeah, there was one other thing. I mean, you know, like you say, it's trial and error. And there was one other thing I wanted to kind of ask you about. You said you shot in September, and I don't know if it was always the aim to make it for the Cannes deadline. But when you did you when was the point you had final delivery by, and when you were like kind of ready to, you sent it off to Cannes and all that? And do you think, because I mean, with our feature we're shooting in Australia, that's kind of what we're aiming for as well, to get it in by that time and hopefully for next year's festival. You know, what sort of point do you think it's dangerous to submit late, or, you know, what was, from your experience, did you learn on that front?
Right. I say so. I had two things with the film. I thought there were two times where I thought I could submit to festivals. One was like October or November, around that time, where you can get in for Berlin, and there's a couple of the South by Southwest and all that have similar submission dates then.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I was going to wait to Cannes, and Cannes was, you know, I'm starting to forget actually. Was it February or something like that? No.
I think the deadline is March.
That sounds right. Yeah. So March, and then I was like, I want to go to Cannes, but I need, like, is it ridiculous? And I won't know until I see some of the film put together if I feel like it has a chance. Because if it doesn't, then I'm probably going to wait till bloody next.
Yeah.
And then it's like, Jesus, this is a long process, and who knows. But that question, that answer was taken away from me, because really the film was not ready to submit anyway. So my only chance was Cannes. And I thought I might have something here anyway. Like, you don't know if it's going to get in, but it might be worth a shot. So, and I submitted an incomplete version of the film to Cannes. You know, towards the end of their deadline, like the start of March, I submitted the film, not as a rough cut, but like, you know, it just didn't have final music or final sound. It had sort of more temp in that way. And yes, submitted it just as that. And then, you know, And you know, they're very used to watching stuff in that state. I wouldn't want to send them anything that isn't finished. I wouldn't recommend it, but I don't think it's unusual for them, and I think they're pretty good at,
Okay.
you know, seeing a thing that isn't necessarily in its full extent.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is all a bit of like I said this to Harvey, with filmmaking, it's like you kind of just hoping you make it past the next stage each time. Like, you know, when you're writing, you're hoping that somehow it will make it to pre-production, and then when you're in pre-production, you're kind of getting past every barrier, and that stage seems so far away, but you're kind of just hoping that the next person says yes, and it's kind of just like riding the wave.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And each part seems so, like each part of the process feels like it's a film on its own. Like it's such a mountain.
Yeah.
Each part is like, fucking hell. And you don't really want to look at the next part while you're doing it, because it's just so exhausting. And then, you know, the time you get to the point where you're filming, you're like, fuck, am I finished yet? Like at some point, it's so monumentally exhausting. And then
I was thinking this the other night. I was in bed every night. When I lay in bed, I just think, I worry about the shooting. So now I just look forward to finishing shooting, even though I'm really kind of looking forward to shooting, but it's all like a mess in my head, because I'm like, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? But then I'm like, as soon as we say like that's a wrap or whatever, I know that everything's just gonna be like, and then it's just like, it's all on me now. But that's how I feel with like every project.
yeah, and then you've got a whole new problem. Like it's like, holy shit, now I'm gonna get to the edit and see this in its worst possible state, and try not to kill myself as I watch this thing
and
look awful.
And then you get beaten up by all the film festival rejections. Just getting
Let's not peak too soon. What's your experience? This is very direct to what we're doing now. What's your experience hiring stuff in Melbourne like? Because we just, after a few Google searches, we've gathered that there's this place called Offshoot in Melbourne.
I've worked with Offshoot. They're good.
Yeah. What's it like renting them, or in general getting stuff done in Melbourne?
I don't know I don't understand what you mean.
Oh, sorry. So like with Offshoot and other companies like that in Melbourne, is it a hard task to kind of is it very packed out? Like you said that the Aries are always booked out and stuff like that.
Right.
What's it?
No, I don't think so. Like I don't think it's unusually like, the equipment's all off the shelves, but like it's all cyclical. Like you never know. Like sometimes and also I would have no idea how to answer that, because also when you're shooting, it could be that because COVID like is almost gone from Australia, and it's not quite gone from other countries, that everyone's shooting in Melbourne at that time and there's no equipment around. Like it just depends on the time. It's luck, like, you know, but there's very professional gear houses there and really good people. And there's a lot of stuff around, and then these days, because of the, you know, as you have grown up with, like the cost of doing production has dramatically plummeted. A lot of people have their own gear and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
It's kind of, that's what we're kind of nervous about as well. It's like, because obviously we have all these dreams in our head, we're like, yeah, this should be okay, and then it kind of, when we're coming to shooting, and it's like, that's what I'm sort of worried about. It's like, oh yeah, what if they don't have that? What if they don't have this? What if they don't have that? And it's like kind of worrying. Is there like a lot of different rentals in Melbourne? Do you know?
Oh, there's nothing you could possibly want that they won't have.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Nothing. Yeah, no. I mean, they film Hollywood movies in Melbourne all the time, and they've got everything. Like they've got Panavision there. They've got everything. They've got you know, so much different kinds of gear.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, I mean, it sounds like you pulled a lot of favors to get all these creatures out the door. Do you think, you know, this is, you know, something which there's a culture of in Melbourne, or people are open to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You know, like it's a bit of a dance, and it's like you know, you've got to try to offer something to people or whatever. But yeah, people are aware that it's you know, where things aren't made with unlimited budgets, and you know, people are often coming in trying to get a deal or compromise on something, especially if the gear is not flying off the shelves, the gear that you want is not flying off the shelves. People are very generous.
Yeah, sure. I think
That's good to hear as well.
Yeah, it may be a
Yeah.
good kind of place to circle back to. Now we're coming to the end of our runtime. With your feature-length project, has it been affected much by the current situation, and what's the kind of roadmap look like that now?
It has been affected, unfortunately. Even just the producers that I was partnering up with, they have quite a full slate, and then when this hit, their slate just kind of went everywhere. And I sort of realized, look, maybe I'm not going to be able to work with these guys because they've got so much stuff on, and now it's all blown up. So look, it's affected everybody, I think, and just the uncertainty of it, and then also I think the uncertainty about accelerating what everyone was already having problems with, which is theatrical release, accelerating the sort of decline of theatrical on films that aren't necessarily fucking remakes and sequels. So, and people are just scared. Like it's an uncertain industry and a fearful one sometimes. And you throw something like this in, and people are really scared with investment. So it's made it more complicated. But no, it's when you're making a film, there's all kinds of shit that needs to be overcome, and you're never going to figure out what that is until you're in the middle of it. So it's caused some problems for me for the feature, but it hasn't derailed it.
Would you say it's given you some benefits as well, or is it?
No, it doesn't give you any benefits though. No. I mean, it depends on for some people it kind of has. Like I've got a mate that's shooting a feature, and he was actually just about to start shooting before this hit. And then this hit, and in a way, it sort of has helped him. Like it's everything just naturally paused, and he's got all this time to rethink the film, and not just have to rush into it and rush out of it. He's got a bit of space. So I'm sure there are some people that, especially in the middle of a shoot, I think sometimes it's a bit of a gift to be able to just pause production for a few weeks and catch your breath. But no, it's given me absolutely no benefit.
And I know this is kind of slightly off kilter, but when you were in Cannes or trying to find people to get this film made, did you find that there was is your film Australian based?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Did you find that it was kind of harder to get traction from American producers to get an Australian film made, or did you kind of have to look closer to home? What was that experience like?
I think no. In some ways, it was easy to get traction with American producers, generally speaking. Not necessarily for this film, but for a film or any other project, because they are real entrepreneurs, and they're like, what's the next thing, and I don't want to miss out. And there's a real sense of urgency. So it was fairly, I don't want to say easy, but there was some pretty quick traction with the US stuff. This particular film, though, just because of the nature of co-productions with the US, it's probably unlikely that is how we go. It's possible, but it's not a movie where I think I'm going to cast any movie stars or anyone that's that known, and their system does kind of want that to some extent. I mean, every system wants that, but especially the US. So it's probably not appropriate for this film, but I've got another film that's set in the US that I'm working on as well. So for a follow-up, so that's something that, is I don't know what you say, in talks or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the professional movie speak? That's what you got to work.
Yeah.
I guess that's it, really. I think. Thank you so much for.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah. Zoom just doesn't want us to make podcasts anymore. But thank you so much for being our third guest on our podcast. It really does mean a lot. The way it sort of happened was kind of cool as well, because we just saw your film. Raza saw it on the plane, I think, and then he showed me.
Yeah, I didn't get to tell that story. I've been following you for a while. I know it sounds weird, but I've every year as a little film kid, I kind of pay attention to what's selected at Cannes. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll watch that. And then no film at Cannes comes out for ages. So, so then you're just waiting. And then, following whatever's happening with it. And then when I finally got to see it, obviously, I was actually on a plane on Air Canada coming back from a festival in Seattle. And I saw it on the plane. I was like, "Oh, they have it here! I just watched it quickly." But then I got to watch it properly again when it came out on Vimeo. So that's kind of how this came about. And then on Huft, we've been trying to come up with creative ways to put content out there. And we've been doing short film recommendations. And the good thing about short film recommendation is that there's loads of, I mean, I say, like teetering on feature filmmakers who are making short films, which we love and we'd love to talk to. And, they don't have that too many Instagram followers, but they probably won't see it if we tag them. So we're getting, like to talk to Charles Williams and other people like that. So it's been a very fruitful experience. And
Benny Safdie as well. Benny
Safdie liked our post. And he said no to come on our podcast, but it was good to talk to him.
That's so funny. Actually, I put it in something yonks ago when Good Time came out, and he's commented. We were messaging for a little bit as well. I actually saw him at the premiere of his Uncut Gems.
Oh,
really?
I was like a fan. I was like, oh, this is really great. And
oh my God.
I was like, a Good Time was an inspiration in a way for all these creatures, even though they don't have really anything to do with each other. It was sort of an inspiration for the film.
Well, you can tell Benny that. This podcast was so much fun. You need to do
made
it.
a mistake rejecting that.
We're not hanging out. I'm like, oh, I'll try to track him down for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much again, and it really does mean a lot to us. I think it's going to end any second, I think. But if you want to just say where anyone can find you or whatever, just let the people know.
No, guys, it's like in the Google search away. It's the film's up on Vimeo and on Criterion and all that, and I'm probably a few clicks away from that. So good to talk to you guys, and great luck with the film as well.
Thank you so much.
Charles Williams, remember the name.
Thank you.
See you later.
Hope you enjoyed that podcast, HUFTCAST, whatever you want to call it, with Charles Williams. We found it really interesting to talk to him, especially me growing up in Australia and everything, and the similarities in our work. And we're still fighting for Benny Safdie. We're going to get him one day, so we're not going to lose hope. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the podcast today, or HUFTCAST, whatever. If you want to keep updated on what we're doing at Huft Media, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, what else? Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And you can find out what we're doing there and our plans, and you can also check out the other episodes of the HUFTCASTs with Kyle Seago and Brian Niles. And there's a lot more to come, so stay tuned, I guess.
Hey Benny Safdie, we know you are watching this video. Please come on our podcast. We begging you. Please check your Instagram DM now. Please come on our podcast. Please.